Welcome to Youth Ministry Unscripted, the Rooted Youth Ministry podcast, where we talk real, honest, and raw about gospel-centered youth ministry. I'm one of your hosts, Danny Kwan, and this is Isaiah and Josh. Please say hello, guys.
Hey, everybody.
Praise the Lord. How y'all doing?
Good. It's good to be with everyone again. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite but difficult topics of helping unengaged teenagers. And all of us, the three of us here, are youth pastors who have done a lot of youth ministry. And, we love the students who are leaders and engaged and fired up. But we always have those students who are unengaged and not as involved. And we want to think about how do we get unengaged students engaged, and that can come, what an unengaged student looks like, and a picture of that can be, and reasons for that can be a variety of reasons. But generally speaking, Isaiah and Josh, what are your thoughts about unengaged students and how to, generally speaking, think about getting them involved?
Well, I think, if by unengaged students, if we're talking about, I'm making an assumption, so tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Students who are a part of your church in some way, but they've fallen out of engagement in your youth ministry. That's kind of what I would think about. So you might have people whose their parents are members of our church. They may attend on Sunday mornings, some or all of the time, but youth ministry, for whatever reason, they've fallen off the map. I think there are a couple of things that I think of on that. Number one is, for me, is just kind of like making sure those kids stay on my radar. As having a medium to large size youth ministry, it could be really easy for me to only be focused on the kids that are coming to stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think having a way that you know who those kids are and keeping that in front of you, I think, is important. So the first thing is I have I don't know if y'all ever have used something like Planning Center. That's a popular software. They have a thing in there called workflows. And I have a workflow set up that keeps me aware of who those kids are. And it's kind of attendance based. So it's kids whose their parents are members, they're in a certain age group, and they don't attend anything that we go to. And so I kind of, from those, I weed out maybe any kids that actually don't go to church. Their parents are members, but they're not at our church anymore. I don't really think about those ones as ones I need to think about, but I do have that list. So that's step one. But then backing up a step would be, a lot of times those kids were involved and then stopped being involved slowly over a long period of time. And so I have another workflow in there that notifies me when the students who have been involved have ceased to be involved as regularly. And that kind of, we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but that kind of cues off ways that I can stop that in the beginning. So that's real general, but number one is just kind of knowing who those kids are and making sure that they're on my radar.
Which is important because I think it allows you to be intentional about having touch points,
Mm-hmm.
about reaching out, connecting in some way, to invite. So.
And this is, again, unscripted, so I love off the cuff. I'm sorry to you guys for doing this, but when I prepared this podcast, I also thought about students who come, but they're not, like, they just come like once a week, but they might not have a lot of friends, or they don't take that next step of growth or discipleship, or I want them to come to a summer camp or a mission trip or get involved. So just to throw a little curveball in our thinking about unengaged students and how to get them more engaged in the youth group. That's kind of like my thinking, maybe they just don't have a lot of friends, or they, feel shy, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of that's going to just depend on the kid, right? So,
Yeah.
so the big thing is, whether it's the kind of kid I talked about or the kind of kid you talked about,
Yeah.
what is it that's preventing them? So, sometimes it's a parental level issue. If a kid is so involved or so pressured academically or extracurricularly that they don't have time to come to youth group, then it might be worth a conversation with a parent. But then you're kind of getting into how instructive do you feel comfortable in being towards parents about kids, as well as just like, have they thought through like how important is youth ministry to their family? Do they have other ways their kid is being discipled that don't necessarily involve us, but might be adequate or sufficient to that kind of thing? But if it's just involvement, number one would be, however, the reason that they're not involved would dictate kind of the answer to how you do it. If it's a shy kid, it could be utilizing other students to invite them to things.
Yeah.
If it's just a student who needs to be drawn out a little more, it might be notifying adult leaders that would be sort of in charge of that age group.
Yeah.
If it's just they don't, it might just be they need to get together with you and you talk through and kind of suss out what is the issue here with this kid. It could be that they're not a Christian. I think some students are uninvolved and uninterested in youth ministry stuff, especially if you're kind of a discipleship heavy youth group where it's a lot of pretty intense Bible study and a lot of accountability and prayer and things. Then that means some students that just aren't born again are not going to be interested in those kinds of things. And so it could be an evangelistic opportunity. And so you might be looking for ways that you can invite them to events where they're going to hear the gospel, or it might be conversations that you personally need to have with them because this student needs to hear more about what it means to be a Christian. So there's a lot of different answers to it. I think the first one would be identify who they are and then find out what the issue is, whether it's from a parent or directly from that student.
Yeah.
Wading into youth ministry can be overwhelming. It's more overwhelming if you don't have someone to lean on and learn from. The Rooted Youth Ministry Mentorship Program was created for youth pastors in precisely this situation. The program is designed to provide both small group and individual coaching for youth ministers who are in their first 3 years of youth ministry, or youth ministers who are transitioning to a gospel-centered approach. This program is 1 year, wherein small groups of 4 to 6 youth ministers are led by one mentor in both a cohort and an individual setting through a carefully crafted 12-month curriculum designed to help you grow spiritually as an individual and as a youth minister. This comprehensive curriculum, designed by and for youth ministers, cover all facets of youth ministry, from Bible teaching, relational discipleship, equipping and training volunteers, missions, retreats, and crisis management. At the end of the program, we expect you'll be more proficient in teaching the Bible to students. You'll feel more comfortable partnering with parents, and you'll be better equipped to handle crisis situations, among other things. Additionally, when you complete the program, you'll receive a Rooted Youth Ministry certificate to affirm your commitment to join God in the work that He is doing in the lives of the students you serve.
So we're going to kind of get into, Josh, what you hinted at with this idea of getting both students and other adult volunteers and yourself to help engage the different type of students that are unengaged, whether they don't come or they come and they're not as actively participating in youth group. And so, first of all, how do we involve other students to engage with unengaged students, fellow students, peer to peer?
Yeah, I think in my experience, that has been the most effective way. And so we all have those young people in the student ministry that are the shy, quiet types, but we also have those who are more extroverted, love engaging and love talking to people. And so I think utilizing those who are mature in their faith, but who are also a little bit more extroverted, and feel comfortable and confident in engaging with their peers in that way. And so I said, for me, I think that was one of the most effective ways in which I was able to connect students with other students who were not engaged.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think I totally agree with everything Isaiah just said. I'm gonna throw an unscripted wrench in our section here, and I just admit that there's a place in my youth ministry that I've become increasingly aware of a couple of kinds of kids that I don't really have the answers to how to engage them well and keep them involved. Okay, so number one would be a student who is, let's say, like a middle school boy who just doesn't want to sit through a Bible study. They're too rambunctious. Like I don't have any. I don't believe that the ability for a boy to like have a long attention span equals spiritual maturity any more than I do their long attention span does equal spiritual maturity. But sometimes you have a kid who's rambunctious, they're kind of fidgety, and then you have a small group leader who maybe wants to have a serious discussion. This kid is a hindrance to that discussion. And so there's this dynamic that's like, oh, when this kid isn't there, things actually do maybe run a little better in the small group leader's mind. And so that maybe causes a dynamic where they're a little less inclined to reach out if the student doesn't show up because they think, oh, the group went so well. And then that kid doesn't feel loved. So there's that kind of thing. So that's one kind of student. I don't know really how to do that part. And then another one is, you talk about utilizing students. I think that some students often in our youth group do very, very well about bringing new students in. But there's a certain kind of student, and I think often this has, in my experience, has fallen into like someone who maybe might fall into the autistic spectrum, maybe. Like I'm not a counselor. I can't. I'm not gonna like try to diagnose a kid. Sometimes it's been kids that I know are on the spectrum. Sometimes it's kids that I suspect maybe could have an element. Like I think our students, like if a student had Asperger's or something that was really obviously a learning difference, they would be so great with that student. But when it's kind of the high functioning differences that just maybe sometimes come off standoffish or incapable of social cues, I think that our students will try hard for a little while, but then after a while of maybe unsuccessfully trying to engage in someone, they just kind of give up on it. And then that student feels uncared for, and then they go tell their parents that they're not being cared for. And it just creates this is just an area where I don't know how persistent to be or what the answer is. That's a question. I don't, maybe you guys have some answers, but that's a place where I'm like, man, I really don't feel like we're doing a great job at figuring out how to long-term help that type of a student.
Yeah. That's definitely, again, we're breaking into a whole nother unscripted aspect, of special, mental illness or, I know ADHD is not necessarily mental illness, autism, but, we've had some cases like recently I met a mother who, her son is now 30, who just told me, like, this is like 2 months ago, that her son was autistic and pretty high, highly autistic. Like one time when he was in youth group, he went number 2 during a youth group meeting, and it smelled up the whole room, and it was kind of all over, made a huge mess, and there's a whole other aspect of dealing with that, but she was so thankful to see me because he's really doing well now in his life. And, but, we really had to have some special, like students, really special kind of training for them to kind of minister to him and care for him and follow up and process how difficult it was for them to try to care for him when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
My more general point on this is definitely, I think I have this thing, I only use it with my student leaders, but our youth group can be very cliquey because it's big, and when students come from who have not grown up at our church, I tell our student leaders, we have a thing called 4 weeks, be a fake friend, quote unquote, with a newcomer, and for 4 weeks, sit with them, eat with them, talk with them, be their shadow while they're there at church. And I found that if a student can do that for 4 weeks, they develop a friendship with the new student, and it's really helped newcomers at least really be involved in the youth group. So we call it the fake friend, but it's not really fake, but it's kind of like my fairly mocking way of saying be their shadow for 4 weeks. So I'm just
I think in that second part
yeah.
that Josh mentioned, I think it takes all hands on deck, because there is a very real sense or very real reality that some kids just get tapped out of
Yeah.
trying to pursue and all that. And so that's where you start inviting the adult leaders in, you know, kind of like a tag you in, you know what I mean? I'm out type of
Yeah.
thing. Because I think the pursuit is important. I even think about my daughter, who just started. She's gonna be starting the 6th grade, and she started running cross country for the first time. And as you can imagine, not being a runner, really going out there, and it's terrible. You know what I mean? Like that first initial time is terrible. But the way her teammates, those young people, kind of rallied around her, made her want to continue to do it, even though it wasn't pleasant. And I think that pursuit is important, whether it's that young person pursuing their peer, or if it's that adult leader pursuing that young person, or if it's us as the youth pastor, youth director pursuing. I think we can't stop pursuing. And I think about that in terms of like how the Lord pursues us, because we're not always obedient. We're not always like our hearts are not always in a good posture to receive what the Lord is doing in our lives. And sometimes we backtrack, you know what I mean? And we fall short, but the Lord keeps pursuing us. And I think it's in that pursuit of those young people where the beauty happens, where the Lord works in that, and get them engaged.
So Isaiah, you brought up a really good point about tag teaming students and adults. Let's think about how we get adult leaders to help unengaged students, maybe kids who don't come out or kids who show up but are not as involved. Do we train them? Do we encourage them? Like I know in our youth group, I tell the adults they're not just chaperones, but they're shepherds,
Yeah.
and really to have that heart of a shepherd to reach out and help students get engaged, but maybe visiting them at their track meet or orchestra concert or football game or something like that. But how do we use adult leaders and volunteers to help unengaged students get more engaged?
I think setting expectations early, as you mentioned, not seeing themselves just as chaperones.
Yeah.
And I know that term volunteer can even be sort of a problematic term, but as shepherds, right? And so what I would do is, if this adult leader is overseeing and shepherding, 9th grade boys or whatever age group that is, I would, at the beginning of the year, I will give them the list of those students and empower them and encourage them to reach out, to engage with those students. And I think that's how we identify those who are not as engaged. That's how how we could be intentional about making touch points with those who are not engaged, to just continue to invite, continue to reach out. And sometimes maybe they're not engaged in the youth group, but we can go to a track meet.
Yep.
And we can meet them where they are, type of thing, to show that we do want to connect with them and that we do really care for them.
Youth workers, Have you ever experienced the puzzle of building a discipleship strategy for your students? Trying to find the curriculum pieces to fit in the places of Sunday school, small groups, and events can be a true challenge. In a search for traditional curriculum, it's difficult to find the format, length, topics, and themes that best fit the vision you have for teaching your students. Sometimes you order a curriculum study only to realize some of the theology doesn't line up with what your church or denomination would teach. With your youth ministry curriculum, you can have the freedom of a custom curriculum piece built for your ministry. Imagine curriculum built by someone else to free you up to focus on investing in students based on your schedule, your format, and your theology that will best equip your leaders to disciple your students. You and your students can find the perfect piece to fit your discipleship strategy with custom content from your youth ministry curriculum. Visit us online at youryouthministrycurriculum.com, and let's start a conversation on how your next small group, Sunday school lesson, or event resource can maximize biblical content for your students today.
Yeah, I think for adult volunteers, I think that they're going to be your first line in preventing unengaged students. So, in my mind, at least in our experience, typically what I'm thinking of when unengaged is students who were engaged and now they're not. They've entered into your youth ministry in some way as middle school students, and over time, they've become less engaged. I think adult volunteers are your first people who are going to build a relationship. They're going to be the culture builders in a small group setting. They're going to see the interactions more than you will as the youth minister typically between that student and other kids their age, and they're going to be able to get ahead of the things that might be causing a wedge between that student and other students if the things that are preventing their engagement are social, which I think many times are social. It's they don't feel connected, they don't feel cared for, they don't feel brought into a group. And so I think that volunteers are going to be the first one. And if you don't have a system like I mentioned, so like something like Planning Center that's attendance based and you can see that stuff, they're also going to be the first one, hopefully, to notice when a student has been missed. And often, and this is not just for students, this is for adults as well. When an adult, for whatever reason, stops coming to church for a time, even if it's for a legitimate reason, if time goes by and no one notices that they're not there, that's going to start to mess with their head. If they get 4 weeks in, 6 weeks in, and they haven't been to church, even if it's just because they were sick or they were traveling or whatever, and nobody calls and nobody says we missed you, or you show back up at church after 6 weeks and nobody seems to realize that you weren't there for that amount of time, then you're going to start to think, is there any reason for me to be here? Nobody seems to miss me. And it's the same thing with students. If they go week after week and they don't show up, and nobody acknowledges that they weren't there, nobody calls and checks in, then that's going to start to mess with their head. They're going to think there's not really any reason for me to be here. Nobody cares if I'm here or not. Yeah. And so I think your adult volunteers need to be the first ones to acknowledge. They need to give a phone call or a text message. Hey, we missed you. If a student misses more than 2 in a row, I would say that they need to get a text message from you. And you need to start doing it, because at some point, if you don't do that early on, then it starts to get weird. Like it starts to not make sense and be unnatural for you to reach out. Oh, you haven't been here for 6 months? Well, now I'm going to call you? Well, it doesn't make any sense. It needs to happen early on. So I think helping volunteers see expectations and have that kind of ownership on it in the early stages is going to be your best way of doing that. And they're the ones who are going to mobilize students as well. So they're going to not just say, I'm going to call them, but they're going to say, hey, who's not here tonight? That should really be a part of any small group meeting. Who are we missing tonight? You take attendance, not just so the youth pastor can tout how many students you had. That's what I tell my leaders. I'm like, I don't care. Nobody's asking me how many students we had on average this year, and I'm not getting a pay raise based on that. We keep attendance so that we can care for students. And so they need to be able to see and go through and say, they haven't been here in a while. Somebody reach out to them. I will too. Or have everybody text them, all at once. We missed you tonight. Yeah. And that will help. So that's a long way of saying it. But yeah, I think they're the front line for preventing it from getting to the unengaged side.
Yeah. And we've had different systems to make sure we're doing that. Like, again, Josh, your number, if a student misses 2 weeks, I'm making sure the adult leader of their small group and myself are reaching out to them.
That's right.
I usually text them and offer to have a meal with them. Again, I'll have all the student leaders, text them or something like that. This is so old school, but being in youth ministry so long, but every 2 months we'll have student leaders write little cards to anybody who's been not showing up for a month to the youth group and stuff like that. And they'll get 30 letters in the mail, and I think it's nice and touching to I hope they receive it. There's no way to confirm it, but we will write letters to the kid who's missing.
But it's a way to connect, and it's a way to care for them.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, I think it's still important. We, again, even text messages are great, but some human kind of a phone call,
Yeah.
is talking is great. So one last question. As far as like what you do in your ministry programs or events or any other ways you've done maybe to invite or reach out to unengaged students or get students more involved, can you just share an idea with some of our listeners that purposely that you might have done something to get students more engaged, or a fun night, or have students invite their friends or invite kids who haven't been out in a while?
Well, as we know, man, it can be a variety of different reasons why a student is unengaged. And maybe for whatever reason, some extracurricular things they can't attend, like the regular, Wednesday night meetings that you have that consistent. And so those retreats become important. Like if you have a fall retreat, winter retreat, those retreats. But one of the things that I also used to do is I would, in addition to like a retreat, we will have some kind of fun activity that we'll do outside of the church, maybe on a weekend or Saturday, like a bowling night or something like that, where you can invite those who are unengaged. So inviting them to those retreats, yes, and then inviting them, if they can't for whatever reason attend the retreats, inviting them to some kind of fun activity that you host for the student ministry.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think we have different kinds of events that might appeal to different kinds of students. So like in the summer, we have stuff that's a little more sports related. Sometimes we'll have game nights. Sometimes we'll have movie nights. Honestly, our retreats have often been a place where less engaged students still want to come. They still enjoy the retreats. So even if they're not as engaged in the week in, week out, a lot of our unengaged students may still come to those. I think those are helpful. And then another one that we've done lately that has been somewhat successful, I've mentioned this in previous episodes, but we do a thing called Senior Sunday, which is kind of a senior year of high school series of conversations that are pointing towards post-high school life. And so students who have not been involved very much in high school sometimes will come to that. Even if it's the only touch point that we have with them. So they might not come to Sunday. It's during our Sunday school hour. They might not come to any Sunday school senior year, but they'll come to that. And so I think that just having a variety of things that you're offering to keep those students engaged on some level, and then trying to take advantage of when they're at those to check in with them, ask them how you can serve them. Sometimes they're not going to, sometimes students just aren't going to connect with other kids in the youth group, but they can connect with you, or they can connect with a small group leader in charge of that group, who might only see that kid outside of small group, but that connection might be enough for them to feel loved and cared for, and come away with some kind of positive experience in church, even if youth ministry hasn't been something they've been terribly involved in.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. And so on that note, we just want to close with a little bit of a fun question on a fun, memorable, or it doesn't have to be fun, but a memorable outreach event that you have done in your youth ministry. And, it can be, again, something fun or something more serious. And, Josh, you mentioned your senior night. I wrote a Rooted article about this we did a tradition every Thursday called Senior Night, very creative title, but where we gathered the seniors and we told the parents, hey, we're going to work on college apps, but it was more like a time of sharing and eating and just talking about their future. And like you, Josh, we seniors who didn't come out on Sundays or Wednesdays would often come out to this senior night, and they just want to talk about their future and post-college life. And again, I wrote about this in a Rooted article, and it was one of the best outreach events, especially for seniors who were busy or just not coming out to youth group, but they would come every Thursday to this event, and I thought it was really a really great thing that we did over the years. And so that's my kind of fun, memorable outreach event.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about, if we're talking specifically about unengaged students, I would say some of our retreats would be the thing that would fit that category. It's we have some fun traditions built around, say, our fall retreat, that I think students who might not be in for our weekly stuff would still really enjoy the fall retreat. It's kind of a nice combination of programming and fun stuff, but also it's just kind of a relaxed time. They're not allowed to have cell phones. It's very chill. It's a lot of just time spent together, and I think that holds an appeal for a lot of students. So that's not necessarily like an evangelistic outreach event, but it is one where students might be inclined to come that aren't normally there. Or our Disciple Now weekend, Isaiah, that we've done together in the past, like that might be one that unengaged students might come to, but also students might invite their friends from school. And it's not explicitly only an outreach event, but it does serve that function. Sometimes students are going to hear the gospel, they're going to be pulled into the youth ministry in some way, and it might be a connecting point for them to be more fully involved in the future.
Same here. So yeah, we will partner with Josh's church in that Disciple Now. But we would in the fall we will host our own like fall retreat, and that specifically that fall retreat was one that a lot of the unengaged, we would get a lot of those unengaged young people to come, and which was a great opportunity for us as like the adult leaders, where we would be intentional about connecting with them, learning about what they have going on, ways that we could connect even outside of the church with them. So those retreats were huge for us.
Yeah. No, thanks guys for this conversation on a very important, tender, and it's a heartfelt topic for all of us as youth workers, these unengaged students. And just closing with some words of encouragement that we embrace the hope and joy of the gospel and believe that it's true, powerful, and transformative. Please listen to the Youth Ministry Unscripted on all the places you get your podcasts, and thank you for listening.